The Women Annihilator, a true story. How could families in 1885 lock their doors, bar their windows, and still wake to find death waiting inside? In Austin, Texas, the night became a hunting ground, and no one knew who the predator was. This true story begins with fear, descends into horror, and leaves a mystery we'll try to solve today. Part 1. Austin 1884, a city unprepared. In 1884, Austin was a city on the rise. It was the capital of Texas, the home of the brand new University of Texas, and a place that prided itself on progress. Yet beneath the surface, Austin was still a frontier town, small, vulnerable, and unprepared for the terror that was about to descend. The city held about 17,000 residents. By modern standards, it was little more than a large town. Streets were dirt, lighting was scarce, and police patrols were thin. After sunset, entire neighborhoods were swallowed in darkness. How safe could a city be when whole blocks had no lamplight? Austin's population was diverse but divided. Wealthy white families controlled politics and property. Freedmen's communities housed African Americans who had only recently escaped slavery. Many of these men and women worked as domestic servants, often sleeping in small wooden shacks at the back of their employers' homes. Did anyone ever stop to ask how secure these quarters were? A simple latch on a door, a thin wall, a window left open in the Texas heat. Could such places really protect anyone from an intruder? The city liked to see itself as modern, but the truth was different. There was no fingerprinting, no forensic science, no organized system for solving violent crime. If someone was murdered, justice depended on unreliable eyewitnesses, hurried arrests, and often nothing more than guesswork. What chance would a city like this have if it faced a predator who killed not once, but again and again? Even daily life exposed Austin's weaknesses. Servant girls walked home alone after dark. Families left windows unlatched to catch the summer breeze. Houses were scattered, sometimes with long stretches of empty land between them. In a place like this, how easy would it be for someone to slip unseen through the shadows? The Colorado River cut through the city, a natural boundary, but also a reminder of isolation. Heavy rains could flood crossings, limiting movement. Dirt roads turned to mud in storms, slowing communication. If a killer struck one neighborhood, how quickly could word travel to warn the next? Austin's leaders celebrated the city's future, but they ignored its cracks. Policing was underfunded. Racial inequality shaped every decision. The city celebrated its growth while leaving its most vulnerable citizens, domestic workers, washerwomen, and poor families, exposed to danger. Did those in power ever imagine that neglect could come back to haunt them in the most violent way possible? By the end of 1884, Austin looked like a city moving forward. In reality, it was a city waiting in the dark. And when the first scream tore through the night, the truth became clear: Austin was not ready. Part 2. Midnight Murders. The Terror Begins. The terror began on December 30th, 1884. In a small servant's cabin behind a house in Austin, Molly Smith was attacked as she slept. She was only 25, and her life ended with a single, crushing blow from an axe. Her body was dragged outside into the cold night, mutilated in ways that horrified even seasoned officers. Her companion, Walter Spencer, was struck too, but survived with grave injuries. This was not a burglary. It was the beginning of something far worse. In the months that followed, the pattern repeated. Women were attacked in their beds, most of them African American servants living in modest quarters away from the main homes. They were dragged from safety into yards and alleys, left posed in grotesque ways that suggested cruelty beyond simple killing. At least 6 women were found with sharp objects forced into their ears, a bizarre signature that defied explanation. The method showed consistency. The killer struck after midnight, slipping into shacks and back rooms, armed with an axe or heavy blade. Victims were stunned with a blow to the head, often while still sleeping. Some were mutilated further once unconscious or dead. Their bodies were displayed in ways that seemed designed to shock. Silence was his weapon. No dogs barked. Few neighbors heard a sound. How could he move so quietly through a city already restless with fear? As the months passed, the list of victims grew. Eliza Shelley in May 1885. Irene Cross just weeks later. Her body slashed so severely that neighbors described it as butchered. In August, 11-year-old Mary Ramey was murdered, dragged from her bed and left lifeless. The brutality escalated each time, pushing Austin deeper into dread. Then came September. Gracie Vance and her boyfriend, Orange Washington, were attacked together. Their bodies were discovered near an outhouse, beaten and mangled. The fact that a man had now fallen victim showed that this was no longer a predator focused on women alone. No one was safe. The climax came on December 24, 1885. On that single night, two prominent white women, Susan Hancock and 17-year-old Eula Phillips, were murdered in separate parts of the city. The violence was unmistakable, deliberate, and public in its symbolism. The killer had crossed every line. In the span of a year, Austin lost at least 8 people to this unknown figure. Many others were left wounded and traumatized. The murders were not random, not impulsive. They were systematic, calculated, and staged to terrify. Austin was a small city. People knew their neighbors, saw familiar faces at church, in markets, on the streets. The realization that one of those faces might belong to the killer only deepened the unease. The question was no longer if he would strike again, but when. Part 3. Fear in Every Home. By mid-1885, the murders had transformed Austin into a city of fear. Daily routines collapsed under the weight of dread. The streets emptied after sundown, and neighborhoods that once felt safe turned into places of suspicion. The violence was no longer a distant rumor. It was a constant presence, lurking in every shadow. Servant women were the first to feel the impact. Many refused to stay in their quarters at night, insisting on sleeping inside the homes of their employers. Others quit their jobs entirely, leaving families without the help they had long depended on. In some households, whole rooms were rearranged so servants could sleep in the center of the home, close to locked doors and armed men. Families changed their habits as well. Doors were bolted, shutters nailed shut, and lamps burned long into the night. Fathers, brothers, and sons kept rifles across their knees as they sat awake, listening for footsteps outside. Mothers gathered children into their own beds. Ordinary homes turned into fortresses, though everyone knew the thin walls and flimsy locks offered little real protection. Vigilante groups patrolled the streets. Some carried lanterns, others rifles, determined to scare off the intruder. These patrols often lacked coordination, leading to arguments, false alarms, and occasional fights. Still, their presence reflected how little faith citizens had in the city police. When lawmen failed to protect them, the people tried to protect themselves. Fear also spread through rumor. Witness descriptions of the killer were wildly inconsistent. Some claimed he was a large black man. Others swore he was white, disguised with soot or lampblack. A few even described a figure moving like a woman in the dark. With no clear face, everyone became a suspect. Men walking alone after sundown were challenged in the street. Neighbors eyed each other with unease. Suspicion turned friends into potential enemies. The newspapers fueled this tension. Stories described the murders in lurid detail, speculating about demons, cults, or madmen. Headlines warned the killer could strike again at any time. Each new article amplified the fear rather than calming it. Citizens read about the attacks at breakfast and spent their nights staring into the dark. How long can a community endure that kind of fear? In Austin, the answer was clear: not long. By the autumn of 1885, the city's spirit was breaking. Shops closed early. Church services were thinned. Families hesitated to visit one another after dusk. The city still functioned, but in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly might draw the killer's attention. The servant girl Annihilator had taken more than lives. He had stolen the peace of an entire city. Austin was no longer a capital of promise. It was a place where every knock, every creak, and every flicker of shadow carried the possibility of death. Part 4. The Hunt for the Killer. As bodies piled up in Austin, the demand for justice grew louder. Citizens expected the police to stop the terror, but what they saw instead was confusion, blunders, and desperation. The city's small police force had never faced anything like this, and it showed. At each crime scene, evidence was poorly handled. Footprints were trampled by curious neighbors before investigators arrived. Weapons were moved or lost. Bloodstains were noted but not preserved. Forensics as we know it did not exist. The police relied on guesswork and testimony, both of which proved unreliable. Was it incompetence, or simply the limits of policing in the 1880s. Over 400 men were arrested during the spree. Most were quickly released for lack of proof. Many were black laborers or drifters, rounded up because of racial prejudice rather than real evidence. These mass arrests gave the appearance of action but led nowhere. Each release reminded the public that the killer was still free. Eyewitness accounts only added to the chaos. Some claimed the attacker was white, others black. A few said he was disguised, or even moving like a woman. With so many conflicting reports, the police had no clear suspect. The image of the Annihilator shifted with every retelling, leaving Austin to wonder if the killer was hiding in plain sight. One man, however, stood out. Nathan Elgin, a 19-year-old African-American cook. He was violent by reputation, and most importantly, he had a physical trait that drew attention. He was missing a toe. At one crime scene, a footprint missing a toe had been found in the mud. For investigators desperate for answers, this seemed like the first solid lead. Elgin's downfall came in February 1886, weeks after the final murders. He attacked a woman in Austin's red light district and was confronted by police. During the struggle, he resisted arrest and officers shot him. He died of his wounds before standing trial. Did Austin's terror end because the killer was dead, or was Elgin only another violent man caught at the wrong time? The case against him was circumstantial. The missing toe, the violent temper, and the timing all fit. But there was no confession, no direct evidence, and no chance for a trial. Supporters of the theory argue that the murders stopped precisely when he died, a coincidence too great to ignore. Others believe the city, humiliated by its failures, simply embraced a convenient answer. In the end, the hunt for the killer produced no certainty. Austin's lawmen had filled their jails, chased rumors, and paraded suspects, but none of it delivered closure. The only thing the investigation achieved was to prove how unprepared the city was for a predator who killed with method and purpose. So, was Nathan Elgin the servant girl annihilator? Or did the real killer vanish into history, unnamed and unpunished? Part 5. The Mystery That Never Died. On Christmas Eve of 1885, two women were murdered in Austin, Susan Hancock and 17-year-old Eula Phillips. Their deaths marked the climax of a year of terror. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the killing stopped. No new victims. No more screams in the night. Silence returned to Austin. But why? Some believe the answer was simple. The prime suspect, Nathan Elgin, had been killed by police only weeks later. His missing toe matched a footprint found at one of the murder scenes, and his violent attack on another woman suggested he was capable of such brutality. Was his death the reason the murders ended? Or was it only coincidence, a convenient explanation for a desperate city? Others argued that the killer had left Austin. Could he have fled to another city, carrying his crimes elsewhere? Some even speculated that he sailed across the Atlantic and reappeared in London 3 years later as Jack the Ripper. The comparison was irresistible. Women attacked at night, bodies mutilated, killers never caught. Yet, without evidence, the connection remains little more than a dark theory. Another possibility was that the murderer was jailed for a different crime. Austin's jails were full of men arrested for theft, drunkenness, or assault. Could one of them have been the Annihilator, locked away for something minor while the larger mystery went unsolved? For the people of Austin, the abrupt ending left unease rather than comfort. A captured killer provides closure. A hanged criminal ends the fear. But a killer who vanishes without explanation leaves behind only questions. How could so many die, and yet no one stand trial? How could the city simply move on? The legacy of the servant girl annihilator is as much about those questions as it is about the murders themselves. The case revealed the weaknesses of Austin in the 1880s, its poor policing, its racial divisions, its fragile sense of security. It showed how quickly order could collapse when violence struck night after night. And it forced the city to confront the reality that progress and modernity could not protect it from the darkest side of human nature. More than a century later, the story still lingers. Historians debate suspects. Writers explore theories. Locals tell ghost stories about the neighborhoods where the murders took place. The details fade, but the mystery remains. The Annihilator was never named, never judged, never punished. Perhaps that is why the tale endures. A solved case can be put to rest, but an unsolved one continues to haunt. The servant girl Annihilator stepped out of the shadows in 1884, left Austin bleeding in 1885, and then disappeared into history. His face remains unknown, but his shadow has never lifted.